Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit Ukraine today for talks with President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He is the first Indian leader to step foot in the country in more than 30 years. The historic trip comes a day after Mr. Modi's stop in Poland and a month since his visit to Russia, which Mr. Zelenskyy described as a huge disappointment. Neha, Poonia with more from New Delhi.
India has historic ties with Moscow. It buys about 40% of its oil and 60% of its weapons from Russia. And India has also not condemned Russia's invasion nor voted against it in the United Nations on the issue. Now, India is also conscious that an internationally isolated Russia means it may push Moscow closer to Beijing, a country that India has a border dispute going on with. But India has also, in the last decade or so, developed closer ties to the US and other European allies as the West looks to New Delhi to counter Beijing's growing influence and actions in the Indo-Pacific. Experts say while this makes New Delhi's diplomatic tightrope walk a tough one to execute, it also puts India in a unique position with access to both Kyiv and Moscow.
One, of course, we have to show the world that, we follow our own path when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and how incrementally India has always stood on the path of dialogue. That's one. And two is the interest in maintaining credibility in Europe. I think that's what you're seeing in a post-Ukraine sort of crisis, that Europe should still consider India to be a credible actor.
Experts say Narendra Modi is likely to project himself and his country as a peacemaker and offer humanitarian assistance rather than make public condemnations like US President Joe Biden and other Western leaders have done on their visits to Ukraine. And Kyiv seems to have acknowledged that the Indian leader will not make the same kind of remarks. Ahead of Modi's arrival, Ukraine said India has the, quote, necessary authority to help settle international conflicts. Part of the trip will also be aimed at doing damage control, experts say, to show Ukraine and the West that India may do business with Moscow, but it's a nation that does not and will not back the continuation of war.
India has, as I also mentioned earlier, substantive and independent ties with both Russia and Ukraine. And these partnerships, they stand on their own. Prime Minister had, I would like to say that this is not a zero-sum game. India, of course, has expressed that we are willing to provide all support and contribution that may be required, not only to find the peaceful solutions, but also in the recovery process later.
India and Ukraine will also discuss defense as well as economic cooperation, as well as investments in the fields of science and technology. Ukraine's also been pushing India to bring trade volumes back to pre-war levels. We're also told there might be a discussion on India's efforts to help rebuild Ukraine once this conflict is over. Neha, Poonia, CNA, New Delhi.